Hey everybody, I'm Meet Bhagdev, a program manager on the SQL Server team. In this video, I'm going to cover what's new with SQL Server and PHP. First, we'll go over the connectors available for PHP, the work we've been doing for our PHP connector, kind of talk about what's new, and then we will jump into a demo on how to install the connector using PECL on Ubuntu, run a few queries, and then eventually get a Laravel app working with SQL Server. For those of you who don't know, PECL is essentially a package manager, kind of like apt-get or Brew. Laravel is a really cool web framework, kind of like Django and ASP.NET. So today, the connectivity landscape includes both Microsoft developed and the open source developed connectors. These connectors allow you to connect from all operating systems from the language of your choice to all SQL products, may they be on premises or running in the cloud. So today our focus will be on the PHP connector. The PHP connector developed by Microsoft can be used on Windows and Linux to connect to SQL Server running anywhere, may that be on Azure SQL DB, on premises, or even on a VM. All right, now let's move on to what's new. In the last few months, we've really tried to keep up with the latest runtime supports for PHP. For example, PHP 7.0 and 7.1 recently came out. You can now connect your SQL Server or Azure SQL database from the latest versions of PHP. We also added Linux support. This was actually something that we were really excited about. You can now use our PHP connector from Ubuntu 15.04, 15.10, and 16.04, as well as Red Hat /CentOS. We've also added a PECL install experience. It's essentially all you really need to do is run a PECL install SQL Serve and you get the connector on your machine. And lastly but not least, we've done some memory management changes. The goal here was to help make your app run a lot faster. We've tried to do a lot of changes that essentially help your app run up to 60% faster. So moving on, what's the road ahead? Going forward, we really want to focus on 4 pillars. The first one being open source, second cross-platform, third feature parity, and fourth support. So when I talk about open source, we want to truly embrace open source in the truest form. So we'll be adding Travis CI, open sourcing our tests, and really focusing on our GitHub activities. We are also looking at adding Mac support for our PHP connector, because we know you can't do that right now, but this is something we're actively looking into. We also want to add some of the new cool features we have, for example, Always Encrypted, Azure AD Authentication, and last but not least, you can give us a call today and we will help you with your PHP questions. All right, now let's go ahead and move on to some demos. In this demo, we're going to install the PHP connector on Linux, as well as its prerequisites, which involve the Microsoft ODBC connector. To do this, first, let's go ahead and add the Microsoft ODBC connector repository. I'm doing this on Ubuntu 16.04 machines, so please make a note of that. So let's go ahead and add. All right, so we've added our repository. Let's go ahead and import the keys. What this essentially does is it makes sure that the package that we're going to install is actually signed and is actually the valid one. All right, so the key was imported. And then let's go ahead and install the Microsoft ODBC connector. So it takes a few seconds. It's going to ask you yes or no for the EULA, which is the license. Go ahead and say yes. All right, it seems like the Microsoft ODBC connector was installed. Next, we will go ahead and install the PHP connector using PECL. So the seamless install experience here is all you run is PECL install SQL Server. You put the version number or PDO_SQL Server and you put the version number. We're using 4.0.6, it's the latest one right now. But when you're watching this video, it might have changed. So please keep an eye out for that. All right, it's going to warn you saying, all right, so seems like it went through fine. So essentially what's happening here is it's getting the PHP connector from our GitHub source, building it and compiling it with the PHP on your machine. I'm running PHP 7.0. You need to make sure you have either 7.0 or 7.1 installed for this demo to work. All right, once it's installed, it'll say build process completed successfully. It'll tell you to add your SQL Server connectors to your php.ini file. I've already done this, but if you were to do it, you would essentially copy this echo statement, put it in your terminal, and your php.ini will then know where to read your SQL Server connector from. So next, let's try running a sample PHP script against SQL Server to see if we're able to connect and get some output. So in this script, we have a server name, connection options, and a very simple query. All we're trying to do is we're trying to get the version of SQL Server that you're running. Once you get the results, it's going to print the output on your terminal. Let's jump right back into our terminal, and from our terminal, all you need to do is run php sample.php, and there you go. It tells you you're running SQL Server preview on a Linux, CentOS Linux machine, and that's pretty much it. For this demo, we're going to try to get a Laravel app on Ubuntu machine and make it work with SQL Server. We're going to use Ubuntu 16.04 and Laravel 5.1. The app is pretty simple. It's called MyBoard. It has two basic purposes. It lets you create to-do tasks for yourself and mark the status of it. For simplicity, I have cloned this project already on my machine. If you were to do this, you would go to SQL Server samples and get the source code on your machine. So since I already have the code, I'll go back to my terminal. So before we go further, the only file that you really need to modify to get the database set up is called database.php. You would go to the config folder, and as you can see, that's the file. So I'm going to go ahead and open that using Visual Studio Code. All right, so in this file, if you see on line 29, it says defaults DB connections. It's very important that you specify this. The way you can tell Laravel that you're going to use SQL Server as a backend is by saying SQL Serve, which is the verb Laravel uses for SQL Server. If you scroll down further, you'll see a connection object. In that, go ahead and modify your host name, database name, username, and password. It's extremely important that your database is already created. Otherwise, Laravel is not going to know where to store the data. So I've already created a Laravel database on my SQL Server. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file, go back to my terminal, and run a migration. All right, it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to do this? Go ahead and say yes. So as you can see, migration table created successfully. What it essentially did is it created three tables for you, the users table, password resets table, and the to-dos table. Laravel uses an ORM under the hood called Eloquent. Eloquent takes care of all the SQL, the schema, the table creations. So you essentially don't write SQL queries, you write objects which get converted into SQL under the hood. So once the migration is done, let's go ahead and run the app. To do that, you do PHP artisan serve. So it says local development server started at localhost. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the link address. All right, bingo. So it says, welcome to the Laravel to-do app. Let's go ahead and register a new user. All right, so I'm making a new user for someone called Franklin. Give him an email address. All right, so the user was registered. Now let's go ahead and log in. All right, so it says I don't have any to-dos yet, but let's go ahead and create some to-dos. All right, so Franklin has two to-dos, clean my house and play basketball. So they're both created. Let's say he goes home today and he's like, okay, I have cleaned my house and I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So you can mark it delete. If you would like to see the results, you can just run a very cool utility called MS SQL, which is basically SQL CLI. Going to go ahead and connect to your database. All right, there you go. And let's see what's in our to-dos table. All right, there you go. It says play basketball, user ID 1. It's not yet complete. So essentially what we did here is we took a Laravel app, changed the connection string to make it work with your SQL Server, ran a migration, started the app, created a couple things, went back to your SQL Server, and you can see that the data shows up there. I hope you enjoyed the demo we went through today. Please check out our PHP connector on GitHub. The project is open sourced, and we'd greatly appreciate any feedback you may have. Also check out some of our new documentation on how to get started with different programming languages like Node.js, Python, running on Linux, Mac, or Windows. Connect with us on Twitter. Our Twitter handles are on the slides, at SQL Server and at Azure SQL DB. Last but not the least, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me at meetb@microsoft.com or tweet at me at my Twitter handle, meet_Bagdev.